In psychology, this is actually called the cognitive triad. So it's this basic idea of your thoughts leading to your feelings, and then your feelings leading to your actions, and then the process repeating itself. So literally everything comes back down to your thoughts.
Welcome to You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. You are ambitious in life and in your career, but something is missing. You want to bring more of your passion to what you do. Because let's be honest, you pour a ton into your work, and it needs to mean more. I'm your host, Laura Eigel. I'm a mom, wife, PhD, coach, advocate, introvert, and indoor rowing fanatic. I'm passionate about living a life that's in line with my values. We'll give you the actionable tips and tools you need to lead with your values, make a difference, and have career success. The world needs more diversity and authenticity in the top jobs at organizations. Your leadership belongs there. You belong in the C-Suite. What gets you up in the morning? What drives your decisions? What do you stand for? No idea, not even sure where to start? I use my values to guide my life and career. It's the basis of how I've built boundaries for myself and stuck to them. Are you ready to dig into what matters to you? Go to thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet. That's thecatchgroup.com to download your free values worksheet to get to your core values and take action on what matters most. Welcome to this week's episode of the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. I'm really excited about today's topic and especially about our guest, Dr. Shelly Bhowmik. She's the founder of Platform Wellness, a wellness practice dedicated to helping women with burnout. Dr. Bhowmik is a double board-certified physician specializing in preventative medicine and lifestyle medicine. She earned her medical degree from the George Washington School of Medicine and Health Sciences and completed her master's in public health and preventative medicine residency at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She was a design thinking strategist at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles and served as a medical director of digital health for an executive health firm in New York City. In my discussion with Dr. Bhowmik, we talked about her personal experiences at a pivotal point of burnout. She courageously tells her story to normalize the important topics of burnout, mental health, and well-being. We talked about the power of mindset as the best medicine for burnout. She walked through her REST framework that she uses with patients and clients to meet them where they are in their wellness journeys to build lifelong habits for wellness. We also talked about the tangible steps that you can take as a leader or as an individual to support others. Let's get started. Well, I want to welcome you to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, can you start off by telling us your story?
Yeah, happy to. I'm a preventive and lifestyle medicine physician based in New York City, and I work with women, and particularly women of color, to help them with burnout. And the reason why I do this work is because of my own personal experience with stress and burnout and mental health issues in general. Something that I've had to deal with on and off throughout the years, pretty much after my mom passed away from cancer when I was in college. That's kind of when it really started for me. But the beginning of 2020, just before COVID really picked up in the US, I was in a pretty bad place. And the scary part was that I didn't realize it. And, literally, I didn't realize it until one Friday evening rush hour, just standing at the edge of the subway platform, asking myself if I should push myself over the edge. That moment for me was so pivotal. I had never experienced anything like that before. And so it was really scary. And I am one of those folks who was so thankful to go into lockdown right after that, or at the beginning part of the pandemic, because I literally needed that time and space in order to heal. And so it was during that whole period of recovery that I came to understand just how powerful mindset is when it comes to your health and your well-being. And just, I like to say that mindset is medicine because it's truly what helped me to overcome everything that I was dealing with. And again, it was such a powerful lesson that I knew I wanted to pass that on to other folks, to other, people of color, to other women, and help them with their holistic health and well-being. And so that was the reason for wanting to kind of branch out, start my own practice, and work on this issue in particular.
Shelly, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. I think it's something that we're not talking about enough of. And I just thank you for having the courage to share it and to do what you're doing, to pivot to then to be there as a resource to coach women, especially women of color, through burnout. Do you feel that we've kind of shifted a little bit of the narrative? I feel like there's been a lot more kind of this idea of talking about mental health. It's a little bit easier to bring it up. It still feels like we have a long way to go. How do you feel like we are in that space? Have we come far enough? Are we still moving towards that, especially when it comes to work and women of color?
And I think we are taking baby steps forward. And it's understandable too, because this is such a difficult topic, on a personal level, on a organizational level, on a societal level. And you've got to learn how to walk before you run. It's going to take some time to really know how to address this issue, especially in the workplace, in that setting. I was also scared to come out and tell my story outright, but then I realized, okay, if I'm a physician and I feel this way, then who knows how many other women that are out there who are too afraid to come forth and say that, hey, I'm having trouble. I need support. So yeah, I feel like the more we talk about it, the more we normalize the topic and the conversation, the easier it's going to be for other folks to get the help that they need. But yeah, it's gonna take some time. We're headed in the right direction, but there's a lot of work still left to do.
Yeah. So you had mentioned in your personal experience that you didn't realize you were to that point until that pivotal moment. So can I ask what was going on in life and how might others relate to that? Do you know until you reach your own pivotal moment? Are there other things that are common signs of burnout? Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. Let me start with the definition of burnout because I think that that's helpful for people to hear. And a lot of people may not know this, but the World Health Organization in 2019, they recognized burnout as an occupational syndrome. So a syndrome that occurs in this occupational or workplace context as a result of chronic workplace stress that's not well managed. And in particular, there are three main characteristics for this syndrome. So the first is low energy, so feeling depleted and drained. The second is feelings of negativism or cynicism related to your work, to the work that you do. And the third is the decreased productivity or efficacy in the work that you're doing. So those are three things to kind of look out for if you feel like you might be dealing with burnout. Again, for me personally, I didn't know how bad things were. And, I should say what I was dealing with had gone much farther than burnout. There's a difference between burnout, between depression, between anxiety. These are all separate things. So I wanted to, make that clear. So yeah, so what I was dealing with had gone well beyond that, but it was difficult because in the past, in my prior life experience with mental health issues, there was always some sort of big life event that happened that would be the trigger. And I think this happens for a lot of folks too. So, again, for me, initially, it was my mom's passing that kind of led to that first episode. So yeah, it like caught me by surprise because there wasn't necessarily anything big that had happened, life changing. And we can talk about this a little bit more, but I have a specific method or framework that I use with patients and coaching clients to help them through this process. And one of the steps in that framework is to seek support. One is to detect distress, and then the other is to seek support. And you really need both. You really need to be able to understand or realize what's going on, but then also be able to lean on others for support, because it's those who are around us that can see things that we can't. We are stuck in it, and all we see is the smoke and the fumes from the burnout, but it's our loved ones who are around us that can really kind of help us realize what's actually going on. And then from there, we can take the steps to move forward. So
I love that you've built this framework. Can you share the holistic framework with us? I know you just shared a couple of pieces of it.
yeah. So the framework I use is called REST, and it stands for Revive, Strive, and Thrive. So there are three separate parts or phases to the framework, and it's really to help you overcome burnout, to manage stress, and to restore energy. So there are 9 steps total that I coach folks through, and I can kind of go over them really briefly if you want, but yeah, that first phase, rest, kind of touched on a couple of those steps. They're to detect the distress, to secure the space, and to seek support. So again, being able to identify that burnout is what you're dealing with, being able to lean on others, find the help that you need. And then the securing space is, you can take that literally or figuratively. You have to give yourself the room to heal. So whether that's physical space, whether that's, time off from work, it can look different ways for different folks. And so those are the first 3 steps to that framework. Strive is the next phase. It's about managing the stress. And the steps in that part of the framework are to restore routine, to tackle triggers, and to master mindset. So really, restoring routine is all about getting back to the basics of self-care. And we're talking about eating nutritious foods, moving your body in a way that makes you feel good, getting enough sleep, just really, really basic physical health activities. Tackling triggers and mastering mindset, those steps deal with being able to identify and acknowledge the emotions that you're experiencing, and from that also being able to identify any limiting beliefs that you have, the thoughts that you have that are creating negative feelings for you, that are then kind of leading to this cycle of you taking actions that you don't want to take, and then that leading to negative thoughts about yourself. And so it's being able to kind of work with that, try to break that cycle, really. And then that last phase, thrive, it's all about, that's when you get to the good stuff. It's all about restoring routine. So in that phase, we want to ease efforts, to hone habits, and cultivate connections. So, just make things easy for yourself, simplify your schedule, simplify your lifestyle. There are different ways to do that. That phase, later on is when I start to help people with those healthy habits that they want to try to implement into their lifestyle. And then cultivating connections. Again, it's so important to just have really strong relationships with those who are close to us. That's what keeps us healthy, happy, and live longer. So it's, a lot of energy needs to go into that. So I know that was kind of a mouthful.
No, that's so good. And the way that you've described it in your framework, like each of the steps in and of itself is such a big thing to unpack. And I love how right now I think people they're thinking if they're burnt out, they just need to take some time off, right? And it's almost like this quick fix, like let's work until vacation, and until this time, or until this thing, and then it'll get better, and then it'll get better. And then you go on the 4-day vacation and you're exhausted. You don't get to enjoy any of those connections, and because you're probably checking in on email too, all those things. But what I love about your framework is that it feels like it's a very layered process, and you're kind of undoing and relearning different things that you've probably been doing for years, right?
Right. No, especially the mindset piece of it. I'll share a little bit more about my story to help folks understand this piece. But so during my recovery process, one thing that I realized was just how much colorism played a role in terms of fueling my own burnout. For those who might be listening, I'm South Asian, I have dark skin, and in our culture, if you have dark skin, you are considered less than somebody who has fair skin. And I know that's true in other cultures as well, but this is something that I absorbed very early on in childhood. And what happened was that I interpreted that to mean that I was not enough, that I would never be enough. And so ever since that point, I did anything that I could in order to at least try and be perfect, be the best piano player, be the best student in social studies, whatever it looked like, I would just push myself and push myself. And, literally I pushed myself to that edge of that subway platform. That's how far it had gotten. And so, yeah, to be able to kind of really dig deep down and figure out, okay, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? What is the thought that I'm having that is fueling this? In psychology, this is actually called the cognitive triad. So it's this basic idea of your thoughts leading to your feelings, and then your feelings leading to your actions, and then the process repeating itself. So literally everything comes back down to your thoughts. The things that you are thinking in your head, that is impacting everything that you do, all the actions that you take. And so if you can kind of get back to that, to that source, to that basic thought, and start to untangle that, that's when the real work can happen. So yeah, it's being able to take a 4-day vacation is amazing. I'll take it. I'll take any opportunity to do that. But yeah, it takes work. It takes work. It takes time, but you can do it. And I think that's the most empowering part of this. It is absolutely something that you can get a handle on.
So as you work with clients, tell me more about that. What could that look like, and how do you work with people?
Yeah. So I work with folks in two main capacities. So one is that I do burnout screenings for folks, for either individuals or for companies as well, being able to provide, corporate burnout screenings. And so that is being able to literally do the full health check. And also that incorporates coaching as well. For folks who, I'm based in New York City, so a lot of those screenings are done in the New York City area. But for those who aren't in New York City, I have separate coaching services as well that can be done virtually. And I like to use design thinking or life design practices or exercises as part of my coaching. No, we didn't talk about it earlier, but it's design thinking is one of my past lives. I was a design strategist, and so I just love design. I love that it gives people the how. As a physician, I can sit there in clinic with a patient and tell them to eat healthy foods, to exercise more, to sleep more, and that's great. And I think we all know those things, but it's the how. It's how am I going to do that? How am I going to actually implement these changes into my lifestyle? How do we incorporate them so that they become lifelong habits? And that's where I think design exercises because it can be really helpful, because they give you the opportunity to really be creative, to play around, to figure out, okay, what am I, let's experiment here. Let's figure out what is going to be best suited for me. And it takes away the failure. Nothing that you try ends up being okay, can I do this, or am I going to fail? It's all about experimenting and just seeing what works for you. So yeah, a lot of design exercises as part of my coaching.
That sounds so fun, and also just very customizable to the person, like you mentioned. Like what works for one person may not work for another, and not feeling like you have to do one thing or another, but just to be able to have the freedom to try different things seems fun.
Yeah. It's something that I run into quite often, because again, as a preventive and lifestyle medicine physician, there are definitely folks who, they want the answer. They want to know, okay, what is the ideal diet that I need to be on? And I can say I can make recommendations to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, this is your life to live. You know what's going to be good for your body and for your lifestyle. And so I just want to make sure that you are successful in implementing and incorporating those things that are going to work for you. So yeah, it's definitely not one size fits all.
Are you finding that when people reach out to you, they have realized like they are at this one extreme, or is it more this idea of I don't want to get to burnout, or is it both?
I think it's a little bit of both. Given that we have been dealing with this pandemic, there are still folks who are very much in the thick of things. It has been nonstop for them. And so, really they are trying to come up to the surface, to take a breath. I see that a lot. And then there are other folks who have experienced it in the past and know that they don't ever want to get back to that place again, and so they want to be more preventative or proactive about what they can do to kind of make themselves stronger.
And it seems as though wherever you kind of are on that journey, there is a place to start.
Yes, definitely. And it's, the framework itself, it's broken down into the steps, but they're not necessarily sequential. I was actually just talking to a friend before the holidays. I was really stressed out with some of my own work, and she said to me, Shelly, I think we need to go back to that step about restoring routine. I feel like you need to just kind of take a breather and work on taking a walk around the block and getting sleep. And it was so true. I had kind of stepped away from it. And so to be reminded of, okay, yeah, let's go back to the basics. Let's just do these very simple things. It's always, yeah, you're always going back to the different steps.
Yeah. And what I like about that, to your point, it's almost like we know what we need to do. But when you're in it, when you're in the thick of it, like you can't see out of the fog. You don't even realize you're in fog until, like you said, your friend kind of taps you and says, hey, you might need to use your own resources. I do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Am I following my own boundaries that I've built that I know work, right?
Yeah. And one point here that I want to make for folks, for those of us who are still in this virtual setting, that's this new workplace, it's even more important in the virtual setting to be deliberate about asking one another how they're doing, because we don't have the benefit of walking by their desk and seeing their body language, seeing them slumped down in their chair or whatever it may be. We need to look out for one another, and doing that by just asking outright, how are you doing? And then pausing and actually waiting for them to respond, giving them that space to respond. That's what helps to kind of keep everybody in check. So
yeah, I love that advice, because I think early in the pandemic, I feel like people were checking in on each other a little bit more, and we are kind of all fatigued by it. In some places, they've kind of moved on, and others are kind of in the thick of it. But as a leader within an organization, do those intentional check-ins with team. And like you said, actually listen to the answer.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of my regrets. One of the regrets that I have about this whole pandemic, the fact that we have stepped away from that phase of where every meeting started, the first 5 to 10 minutes was just everyone making sure everyone else was okay before diving into whatever spreadsheet needed to get done. Yeah, I feel like we really need to kind of bring some of that back, because that's what's going to keep everybody healthy and well.
I love that idea. Using early pandemic
I know.
Zoom etiquette.
Yeah. I mean, we don't need to relive the pandemic again, but definitely we learned some things during that time that I think are really valuable and that do need to be carried forward.
Yeah, well, I love that. Are there any other things that we can do now for ourselves or our teams that you would suggest?
Yeah, I think, again, just normalizing the conversation. And, I know that a lot of companies are trying to do, something about it on an organizational level, whether it be, giving mental health days or like a subscription for a meditation app or that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, a lot of this comes down to the one-on-one with your team, with your partners, again, asking how they're doing and really meaning it. I tell folks that how are you is the most important question that I ask any patient that walks through my door, because in that just very simple question, I learn so much about their health and well-being, so much more than I'd ever be able to gather by asking any other more targeted health questions, for example. And so that's true for leaders too. Just how are you is such a powerful question. And I think we almost throw it away in conversations, but it is really something to lean into.
Thank you so much for that advice. I love your idea of it is being taken care of technically at a lot of these organizations with that, meditation app or with those mental health days. It's so funny because I've seen those come up recently with so many of my clients. And what's happening is that they see the mental health day and they're realizing they're still not taking it, right? Yeah. They're working through it, or something comes up, or they know that they have the app, but they're not quite, they used it once, but they haven't used it again. And so even though we have these things, it's really hard to build those new habits, but everything that a leader can do, you don't have to use an app to just have a really great intentional conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And, again, as leaders, everybody's looking at you. What you say and do is going to set the tone for what everyone else feels comfortable saying and doing. I'm sure your audience is familiar with the idea of psychological safety, the idea of being vulnerable in a group, or being safe, feeling safe to be vulnerable in a group. It is so important to cultivate psychological safety, especially when it comes to, dealing with mental health issues in the workplace. And again, we can do this in little ways, and it's all about being intentional. So, for example, talking with your team, setting a limit in terms of like email times. Okay, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's when we can shoot each other emails and expect responses. But after that, if you need to send an email, fine, but don't expect the response until the following morning. If you're somebody that's shooting emails at midnight and don't convey the message of, hey, you don't actually need to answer this, the person who's on the other end of that email is going to think, oh God, like I gotta get back to them. They're depending on me. They need me. So yeah, leaving loudly is another trick or tip that one of my patients told me about. Are you familiar with this?
No, tell me more.
Yeah, no, leaving loudly, it's super simple. I think it was a coach that came up with this, but it's just the idea of being very vocal about when you are taking off time from work at the end of the day. So say you have your 5 p.m. meeting, and at the end of that meeting, you're telling everyone, okay, I'm going to take my daughter to her dance lesson. I'm done. If you need me, just email me. I'll respond in the morning. And if it's an emergency, call me, but I am done. It's the team's way of knowing that you just put on your coat and you are headed out the door, if we were back in that in-person setting. So yeah, again, just being very intentional and deliberate about conveying these messages to the folks around you. It makes them feel safe to do the same. So
yeah, and it gives them permission to do the same.
Yes.
I love that. And I love what leaving loudly could look like even in virtual. You could even just tell everyone, just as simply, you can just ping everybody on whatever app you are using or whatever messenger you're on, because that could look very similar just in a virtual world.
Yeah, and it's so easy to do, right? It's so easy to say, "Hey, I'm logging off," and I mean it. I'm not going to be checking on my phone the emails that come through. So, yeah, little things that we can do.
Thank you so much for those tangible actions. Well, I have enjoyed our conversation so much, Shelly. How can others connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, so shellybhowmik.com is going to be the best way to learn more and to get in touch. If you're interested in screenings, if you're in the New York area and would want to do screenings, that information is on the website. And if you're not in New York but would be interested in coaching, that information is also there too. So yeah, definitely take a look at that.
Wonderful. And can you tell me a little bit more about the workbook that you've created that we can download?
Yes. So if you go to shellybhowmik.com /thank you, and I guess we can put this in the show notes so people. Yeah. There, I've created a workbook that folks can use to go through the framework step by step. It includes journal prompts, so you can do those on your own as self-reflections, or you can do them with your team. Just a little guide to help you through the process.
I love that. And what a great idea to use it with your team. Love that intentional self-reflection, and to be able to create a space, like you said, for psychological safety and sharing. Well, Shelly, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your experience. I know that by sharing your experience, you're helping to normalize and to show others that
Thank
It's not just them that feel that way, but so many people have felt this way. So just thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for providing the space to talk about this.
I want to thank you so much for listening to the You Belong in the C-Suite podcast. If you are enjoying this content, please remember to rate and review on Apple Podcasts. By leaving a review, you are helping others find this content. We will be featuring 5-star reviews on air in upcoming episodes. Editing and support for the podcast is done by S&E Podcast Management. To get more tips and tools to help you live a life guided by your values, go to thecatchgroup.com. Keep your boundaries and take care.